Hello everyone, and welcome to the How to Make a Five Nights at Freddy's 2 tutorial in Scratch. Let's get started. This series will consist of 5 parts. This is episode 1, where we will be covering the menu screen, glitching characters, the static overlay, play button and continue button, and the menu music. Let's get started. So, the first thing we're going to want to do is delete the cat, or if you're using Turbo Warp, delete that thing. I don't really know what it is. And now we want to implement our characters. So, let's get started. I have the actual Five Nights at Freddy's 2 assets. I recommend that you make your own. So, we're going to make a sprite. And we're going to call this sprite menu characters. I will now import my menu characters. Here we go. Again, I recommend you make your own. As you see, we have the normal one where Chica's glitched, the one where Freddy's glitched, and the one where Bonnie's glitched. Fantastic. As you see, mine doesn't quite fit the screen, so I'll make my size a little bit larger, maybe 101. And as you see now, it fills up the screen. Great. So, before we do anything, let us make one more sprite, and we will call this sprite the data core. This is where all of the behind the scenes things are going to go on, so you don't have to give it any visual. Let's get into the code for this. So, upon the green flag being clicked, we are going to make a variable, and we're going to call it logged on. Right? We're going to check if logged on equals 1. This is how we're going to also track our saving progress, which we will do in a later episode. So, we're going to make a broadcast and call it menu. This menu will be very important, so if you'd like, you can make it very large and put a dash before it so that it shows up at the top of your broadcast menus. Then, underneath this, you can stop other scripts in the sprite and stop this script. If you're not logged in, that is where we will create a bunch of other variables that we'll get to later in the series. So we don't have to worry about it now. The only other thing we have to worry about is setting our continue night variable. So let's make a variable called continue night number, where we will set our continue night number to 1. Because if we're not logged in and we don't have a save file created, we will have to create a new one. In that case, setting our continue night to 0. Then we're going to make a variable called extra nights. Now, this is how we're going to keep track of stars later in the series. So if you want to make it easy for yourself, you can tell yourself that this variable, if it is 0, that will mean none, no extra nights. We have another one saying 1 through 6th, right? That'll give you 1 extra star if it's 1 through 6, and then another one for 2 through the 7th. There you go. If you want to list that out in the variable name so you understand what it is, if you don't want to make it a comment, if you want to make it a comment, write it out in a comment. I'm going to just name the variable that. And we're going to set our extra nights variable to 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to clear graphic effects. Then we're going to do, just like after logged on, we're going to duplicate what's in there and set it at the bottom. That will broadcast our menu, then we will not use our green flag clicked for the rest of the time. Great. So let's hop back over to our menu characters and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to set up a bit of a brightness system where the brightness will change slightly and glitch through brightness and lighting effects. So when I receive menu, let's show it, and let's go to our sound and set our volume to 100. The way the volume block works is it'll set the volume of the sprite. If the sprite has a sound in it and you set its volume to 0, only that sprite's sound will be set to 0. So by setting this to 100, this is also the sprite that is going to do our menu music. So we'll get to that later. we can grab a repeat until. For those of you that don't know, repeat until and forever loop do the same thing as long as you put nothing inside of the repeat until. Repeat untils are better as they allow your game to run more optimally. So wherever you want to use a forever loop, use a empty repeat until instead. I promise you it works a lot better. Head to your looks tab and grab our set block, set color, switch color over to brightness, and then say pick random, set the first number to -10, and the second number to 0. That will give this effect when we play, where it flickers the light value and makes them look as if the light that's illuminating them is flickering. I think it's really cool. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have it go to the back, because we'll need everything to go behind the buttons. We want to make sure everything goes back behind the buttons. So when I receive menu, we'll wait 1 second, and then we will go to the back layer. Or if you want to be a little bit more specific about how your layering works, you can say go backwards 100 layers. Or 1,000, 2,000, whatever you want. Back layer works just fine though. Now let's make another one. When I receive menu, we will show, and we will grab our repeat until or our forever loop. We will choose where we set our size. Mine is 101. Yours might be 100. Yours might be 50. Yours might be 200. It just depends on how big your art is. Then I will switch my costume to my normal costume, which is when they're all the toy versions of themselves. And then this is another spot you can slam in a go to back layer just to be sure. You really don't even need this if you do that. So if you do put a go to back layer inside of that repeat until, you don't need the wait 1 second, go backwards. Great. Now we need to set up a time to wait to glitch. So we can put out a wait and put a pick random inside and say maybe 3 to 6 seconds. I recommend doing 3.01 and 6.01. By putting it in a decimal, you give it much more different types of numbers. See how varied those numbers are, how big they can be, than rather if you were to just put 3 and 6 and see that it's just the whole number. By adding that 3.00 and 6.00, you are giving it more options for more random and variable time intervals. Great. Then you will switch the costume to pick random 2 to 4. This 2 to 4 is anything except my normal sprite. If you have more than 4, it'd be 2 to maybe 6 or 7. But in my case, my highest value is 4, so it'd be 2 to 4, switching between the glitched ones, but not switching to the normal one. Great. And then we will wait 0.1 seconds, because afterwards it'll set it back to normal, which will give it this effect. Flashes, and then every once in a while it will glitch. Fantastic. Fantastic. Next, let's set up the music. We can grab out a menu when I receive menu, and inside of a repeat until, go to your sound tab and implement whatever sounds you want for your background music. If you do not own the background music, I highly recommend you take the link of wherever you got it and put it in your notes and credits for proper crediting of the creator. Video game music as well. Even if you think that it's copyright free, still put the link to the original video or site where you got the sound from for proper crediting. I have the actual menu music here. Right? Fantastic. So, and then you will play your menu music sound until done inside of that repeat until loop. Now we will set up a second set of sounds for our static. So let's grab another when I receive menu. And inside of a repeat until, beforehand, we will say wait 0.1 seconds to give it a bit of time after the project starts. And then I will import my 2 separate static sounds. So here's my first one. And here's my second one. Great. So I want my static 1 sound to play before we repeat the static 2 sound, which gives this effect. Fantastic, I like it a lot. And great, this is all we need inside of our menu characters. Let's move on to our new game button. We will make a new sprite and call it new game button. I will import my art, and I suggest you create yours. Here is my new game button. As you can see, it's very large, and it has a black backdrop which is equal to the backdrop of my characters. The reason being is because if there was no backdrop here, if you were to run your mouse right here, it wouldn't sense it since you're not actually touching the sprite. The only way it would work is if you were touching the letters. By putting a backdrop on here that's the same color as your background, you make it that your hitbox is even in between the words. So I recommend doing that. Inside of our new game code, we will say, when I receive menu. Now, we'll grab a repeat until, and this one we're actually going to put something in. We're going to make a variable called screen status. This will keep track of which screen we are on. So, repeat until not and equals. Put screen status in the first bubble and put menu in the second one. So repeat until the screen status is not the menu. We might as well, underneath the menu button, set the screen status to menu so that when we receive menu, the screen status is set to menu. Inside of this repeat until, we will add a show. Inside of this show, we will put an if-else statement. This if-else statement will check if we're touching the mouse pointer. Now we will make a variable, and we will call this variable menu selection Y. We will set our menu selection Y to the Y position of the sprite. This will be used to move our arrow later on in the video. Next, we will make a variable called scrolling new game. And we will set scrolling new game to 1. Now, we will wait until we are not touching the mouse pointer, and then we will wait an additional 0.2 seconds. Else, we will set our scrolling new game to 0. Now, we will grab another when I receive menu, and in this one, we will set the brightness effect to 0. We will set our screen status to menu. And now we will decide the size and where it will go. I find that 50 size sometimes works well, but it's really about testing and seeing what works for you. 25 works well, so I'll use 25. So, set your size to whatever size works for you. My case is 25. And then decide where this will go. Keeping in mind that I am putting my arrows behind the buttons, so I need to make room for that. So I'll say here, and if we need to move it, we can move it later. Then we will create a variable called night, and we will set night to, we'll make another variable and call it next night. And set night to next night. I'm going to keep splitting these into multiple menus so that hopefully it is easier for beginner programmers to understand. This is not very optimal. You could usually condense most of this into the same script. However, I'm going to split it up in hopes that it's easier for newer people to understand. If you know how to optimize this, I recommend doing it, such as, putting this right underneath there like that. But that's all up to you guys. So, when I receive menu, we will wait until, go to your operators and grab an AND statement, and we'll wait until touching mouse pointer and mouse down. So we'll wait until it's clicked. When it's clicked, we will set our night to 1, because it's a new game. You press the new game button, the first night of the game is 1, so that's all you need to do, and then we will set our continue night number to 1 as well. Since it's the first night, we will need a newspaper. So we'll make a broadcast called game.news or newspaper, whatever you want to call it. I'm using game.news since I'm going to have multiple iterations of game happening. So by naming them all game.something, they'll all appear together in my broadcast menu. So we'll call it game.news, and then we will want to stop other scripts in this sprite. And that's all we need for the new game button. Now let's make our continue night button. So make a new sprite and call it continue night button. I will implement my continue nights. You do the same. Make yourself some very nice continue looking buttons. So here are my continue buttons. You see I have the continue, then I have continue night 1, night 2, night 3, night 4, and night 5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this continue night button to make it match these ones, so that they're all level. Make sure your continue nights are all level so that they won't shift depending on the night. I'm going to set my size to 25 again just to position it where I want it. Say right there is good for me. Great. Now we can get into our program. So, when the continue night receives menu, we will wait until, again, we're going to test for clicking, so touching mouse pointer and mouse down. And then we will set our night to our continue night number. We will make a broadcast and say broadcast game news, and then we will stop other scripts in the sprite. Now we will grab another when I receive menu, and we will set the brightness to 0. We will show. We will go to the location we need it to go to, and we will set the size to the size we'd like it to be. In my case is 25. Then we'll grab our repeat until, and inside we will say show, and then we will check if we're touching the mouse pointer. So if touching mouse pointer, we will set our menu selection Y to Y position. And we will change this to an if else, where we will also set our costume number to our continue night number. If else, we will switch our costume to continue. You might notice that when you start your game and you hover over your continue, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you might notice that it is trying to set our continue night to 1. In my case, my continue night number 1 is the word continue. So if I just move my continue all the way down to the bottom so that 1 actually equals 1, when we start the game, we'll notice that it now actually says 1 when we hover over it. Perfect. That's all we need for our continue night button. Now let's move on to our menu arrow. So, make a new sprite and we'll call it menu arrow. Make your arrow sprite. I'm going to implement mine. Here's mine. Pretty basic, just 2 arrows. And now let's start programming. So we will say when I receive menu, we will need to choose a size. In my case, as the other ones, 25 works for me, and I want to make sure it fits. It does. It fits behind my numbers, which is great. So we will have it set that size to whatever works for you. In my case is 25. And then we will say wait 0.1 seconds to stop any potential weird scratch latency bugs from happening. And now we will say repeat until not screen status equals menu. Okay. So let's create an if inside of here and say if not equals. say if menu selection Y does not equal 0, we will show and go to choose its X position where it is. In my case is -225. And then the Y is menu selection Y, as in where our mouse is, what button we have selected. Now we'll need to do some interesting mouse calculations of where our Y is. So, what I recommend doing is coming to your continue night and switching the backdrop color to a red. Or in my case, what I'll do is I will make another red hitbox and put that behind the button that I have, just so that I am able to see the outer hitbox of my continue button. And the same thing with your new game button. Okay, cool. Now, what we will do is figure out where our mouse is. So, you can check up here to see where your mouse is. If you don't have this on, there's an add-on in Scratch add-ons that'll show you exactly where your mouse cursor is. So, what we need to do is let's grab an if statement, and in our arrows, we'll grab an if statement and put it underneath. And we will need 3 ORs here. So let's just drag out 3 ORs. We have 3 OR blocks. So, all of these will relate to our mouse Y position. Okay? So, what we're doing is we're figuring out where the hitboxes of our menu buttons are and deciding where and at what point my mouse is too far for the arrow to appear. So, as a base measure, I'll say at 0, which is where my mouse is right now, Y position 0, that it's too far away from a button for the arrow to be needing to show. So, I'll check if my mouse Y is greater than 0, then we will set our mouse selection Y to 0. And if it is 0, we will hide it in this else statement. My second number will be -170, which is where my mouse is right now. The reason being is we still have to stick a 6th night button and a custom night button, and I want to give myself space for those buttons to exist. So what I'll say is if the mouse Y is less than -170, and the reason it's less than is because it's a negative number. The further down you go, the bigger the negative number gets, but a negative number is small, so it has to be less than. And then we need to check out our X position. So over here, right here, I don't believe that the arrow needs to be shown if we're all the way over here on cheek is cheek. So -52. So what I'll say is if our mouse X is greater than -52, right? At that point, I don't think the mouse and the arrow needs to show. Great. Let's take a look and see. Well, first, let's get rid of our hitboxes that we put behind our buttons. Okay, with those hitboxes gone, let's take a look and see how it looks. You see when you hover over the new game button, the arrow appears there. As you touch your continue button, it appears there. If we go this way, the mouse will disappear. It disappears as we go up too. Fantastic. The last thing we have to cover for this episode is our static. So, let's get started. We're going to make a costume. We're going to make a sprite and call it static. And you will implement the static that you have to use. Here is mine. Everything we'll need here. By the way, if you're looking for art like this, you can find the exact folder that I'm using filled with this art in the link in the description, where you can download this file, where you can download a folder with all of the assets that I'm using in each episode. So if you go in the description, you'll find a link. You go to the link, you'll download it, and you will find a folder that is full of all the assets that I've used in this video. Anyways, let's continue. After we have all of our static sprites implemented, I need to raise mine a little bit so that it actually covers the whole screen. we can start programming the static. So we can say, when I receive menu, we will show and go to the front layer. Then, since we will be using static a lot, we will want to stop all the other scripts going on in the sprite. And we will create a broadcast called static.costume. Great. Now, let's create a repeat until. And inside, we will put a go200 and grab your set size. In my case is 101. Okay, now what we'll do is we will grab an if-else statement and put it underneath. Inside we will say, if our screen status equals menu, what we will do is we will set our ghost effect to pick random 80.0 to 85.0. Again, adding the point zeros just so we have more ranged decimals. Excuse me. Okay. We'll put a go to front layer inside. And we will say a repeat until not screen status equals menu. You'll grab a wait and put a next costume underneath. You can choose any number that you want. I'm going to choose 0.02 to switch between the static costumes. And we will come back to this else statement later in the tutorial series. So now if we take a look, see that the static covers the screen just like that. And it looks great. Fantastic. Now we will add something called static lines, what I like to call. So we'll say static lines. So I will import my static lines, which equate to these 3 costumes. Great. Inside of here, what we will do is we will say, when I receive menu, we will set our ghost effect to 80. Again, all of these ghost effect brightness numbers, you can putz around with them and adjust them to your liking. I'm going to do what I like, what I think looks good. So we will grab a repeat until and say not equals, so that we can say not screen status equals menu. We will wait, pick random 0.7 to 2.5 seconds, let's say. That's a pretty good range of how often these lines will appear. Then we will say switch costume to pick random, and as you look, we'll see our names, which the names don't really matter. We'll focus on the numbers 1, 2, 3. Then we will show, and now we'll control how fast this goes. So I'll say every 0.1 seconds, we'll switch to the next costume. Next costume. So I want this to happen 3 times since we have 3 costumes. So I will repeat 3 times. And then I will put a wait 0.2 seconds. And I will hide. That's all there is to that. So as we start, when we receive menu, we also need to hide it. Now if we take a look, let's see that every few seconds, the static lines will appear just like that. I think it looks really good. We have one more type of line to add, and that is a moving static line. So we'll make a new sprite called moving static line, and I will add my moving static line, which is 67. Inside of our moving static line, we will grab a when I receive menu. We'll drag a repeat until out. We will say show inside of this repeat until. go to, I'm going to say y being 213. If we set our y to 213, we can see that that's right up at the top of the screen. And then we'll grab a glide button and we'll say how long do we want it to take for the line to get to the bottom of the screen. I'm going to say 20 seconds it'll take for it to get to negative 213, or the opposite side of the screen. In which case then we will hide, and then we will wait, pick random, 1.00 to 4.00 seconds before it will do it again. So let's take a look and see how that looks. See, we get this line that travels all the way down, but we also see it super, super bright. We're not quite done with the programming. So let's add in a repeat until inside of our repeat until and say not equals screen status menu. Right? Great. And we can just put a hide right underneath there, just like that. Inside of this repeat until, we will also put a set ghost effect to, I'm going to say 90, and then we will also go to the front layer. Let's take a look. This is how it turns out. You see the line slowly coming down the screen along with our static. I think this looks really, really nice. And that's where I'm going to end the episode. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching. Peace.